Hey, what's up, everybody? It's 2 p.m., a little after 2, Wednesday afternoon. You're watching Cannabis Legalization News. I'm producer Lauren, and today we're going to be speaking with Cecilia Syverson, the founder and president at Nana's Secret. But first, we're going to get into a little bit of cannabis news. So please welcome our guest, Tom from CannabisIndustryLawyer.com and John from The Talking Hedge. What's going on, guys?
Oh, man, it was a pretty large week in hemp news. And I actually just got a phone call from one of the clients a few hours ago that says that Illinois might actually be testing for total THC in its hemp crop. That's 18,000 square feet of hemp space that's out there, all of which may be hot. And Josh, why don't you explain to the people who you are and why you can give a good answer as to what that would do to the hemp market?
My name's Josh Kincaid. I'm the producer of The Talking Hedge. It's a cannabis business podcast. 5 years ago, previous to entering the cannabis space, I worked at an investment bank. I was a bank manager previous to that for half a decade. So I've seen the online proliferation of cannabis stocks. I've had boots on the ground doing a lot of product and customer validation, and I report on the news every single day, including hemp and cannabis. We've had a lot of news in Washington State as well. Just this last week, there was a ban on all CBD edibles and beverages. So we're 5 years into it, but still trying to fight for what everyone else in the emerging markets is going after.
I can't believe that. I mean, you are 5 years into this. Hemp is legal. This drink is made from legal hemp. And that was some of the big news that came out of the DEA this week. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. DEA announced steps necessary to improve access to marijuana research. And this link, of course, is in the description page of this video. But not only that, the DEA went on to down here really make sure that they drew the distinction between hemp, which is now not regulated by the DEA, and marijuana, which is just THC with Delta 9 THC levels greater than 0.3%. But what would 18,000 acres of hemp in the state of Illinois that was planted this season, what if it's all at risk of testing hot? What would that do to the spot price of biomass, do you think?
I think there's already an overproduction, but anytime you take off 18,000 acres, it's definitely going to increase, at least for the Northeast or Midwest. Whoever gets their product, the byproduct in that region is going to be paying a higher price because of transportation to come in and fill the void of what that 18,000 acres would have produced.
Yeah, the supply chain issues are huge in the emerging hemp and cannabis markets. But one of the things that I like to do is I go and I check the hemp reports here from the panxchange. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they say that the price of biomass really is, if anything, it's gone up a little bit. It's now like $4.25. The last time I checked earlier in the year, it was maybe about $3.50, $3.75. So how do they do total THC in Washington State? Because when I met you like about a week ago at Hemp Fest, I was interested to see how you guys label your cannabis. You label your cannabis with Delta 9 THC levels, but also total THC levels. We don't do it like that in Illinois. We label ours individually in the acid or also the Delta 9 formats of the cannabinoid.
Right. The requirements are pretty minimal. I think a lot of what you're seeing is the addition of what people are adding, especially with terpenes. It's just to try to sell more. All right. So they're able to see from the data that the more information you have, the better decisions that these customers are able to make. And so having CBD and terpene profiles and percentages are definitely increasing those sales. So people are putting more information on there. But THC is really the only minimum you need on there. It's pretty sad, actually.
Oh, man, that stinks. But we're going to have a doctor on in a few weeks or maybe 2 months to talk about the different types of terpenes and how that can add or subtract to the effects of the Delta 9 THC or the CBD. And I thought it was just very, very interesting. Turning back to this as an emerging market, and it really has never existed before. The USDA, and this is just from yesterday, they sent out this press release that says they have this crop insurance coverage available for 2020 coming online, which, this is great. And that press release will also be linked into the description. But you have to understand, if the Illinois crop is all hot, because like, here's something that a lot of people don't get with hemp. The total THC is not what you're supposed to look at. You're supposed to look at the Delta 9 THC, because that's what it says in the Farm Bill. That's what it says in the state of Illinois statute and all the other statutes. And then if the Farm Bill says it, and so it's the supreme law of the land that it's only Delta 9 THC at that 0.3%. And it is cannabis, of course, but it's hemp, because it's going to be a Delta 9 THC level of 0.3% or lower, but you might have a THCA level of 0.5%. And so if you add those together, and of course, with like adding them together, you don't just add the 0.5 of the THCA plus the 0.3 of the Delta 9 THC, because the THCA is a little heavier. You have to take that acid off. And so it wouldn't quite be, a 1-to-1, but it might be, 0.7% total THC once they have done that equation. And that's not what it says. So I think that we were really going to need to see some type of revision to this 0.3% Delta 9 THC level.
And I think we will. I think the Curaleaf just started making claims, right? So the FDA came in, they said no more claims, and then Washington State came on the heels of that and said no CBD at all.
What?
Yeah. And so, I mean, you look at California as a leader for not just the environment, but, utilities or cars or cannabis. Washington State's just kind of following suit of what California did last year, banning CBD infused drinks and edibles. And so I think the USDA stepping in and saying, we want to regulate this as an agricultural crop. It's going to have to be rewritten, all of it, because the West Coast just isn't able to sell it. And that's the biggest market right now. And so I think that there's movement in place. And with the Safe Harbor Act, that those insurance claims are critical. It's key, especially in floodplain states, to have crop loss insurance. So they need to write that, implement it. And if nothing else, have the States Act, kick the can down the road, let the states implement it. Washington and Oregon.
I think the States Act is unconstitutional. I've done stuff on that, just because I think it violates the equal protection. But I do support the complete defunding of the war on cannabis. So like the state's laws, if the state is regulating it, defund the Department of Justice from enforcing the federal law. Because then that means the state's, sitting there and filling the void. It's effectively the States Act, except it doesn't have the affirmative validation that the States Act would. It just has the budgetary effect of it. So you can control it a little bit more without worrying about drawing some type of constitutional challenge. And then I support the Safe Banking Act. I think that's really going to be huge. If you get the Safe Banking Act passed, because unlike the States Act, the Safe Banking Act actually made it out of committee and is going to get some floor time this fall here. And so we're going to do some shows that are really going to concentrate on the lobby days that NORML does to really help push for the States Act to be included, hopefully in the omnibus budget, because the federal budget is going to end here in about 1 month on September 30th. But yeah, I mean, if we can get the Safe Banking Act, think about how the Eastern Seaboard would blow up and the supply chain could continue to blow up, because now they can access finance and capital.
It's probably one of the biggest game changers out there. Once you can automate, you can get financing and you can do banking. It's a game changer. The automation potential for pre-rolls, where you have Organogram in Canada making 40,000 a day. Imagine if they were doing that with blunts in California. The market would change overnight. So once these machines come online, it's a domino effect, because if you can't manufacture and sell a pre-roll at 50 cents and make a profit, guess what? You're either white labeling or you're going to find another product to manufacture.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I think is really going to start happening now, because I don't think the market's ready for descheduling of the Controlled Substances Act until we have this type of supply chain maturation process, where then once the plant has been completely removed from this drug scheduling, then the industry is already ready to mature to the next level. But let's talk about what they did in Washington State. And this is kind of like the gap that's there right now with the FDA not having any guidance when it comes to CBD products. What happened in Washington State when it regards to putting CBD products in like food, for example?
So right after Hemp Fest on that Monday, we saw Canopy Growth spend a couple $1 billion on some hemp company, and then on Tuesday, I think that was the 19th. It was last week. Basically, Washington said there's a ban all out on CBD infused beverages and edibles, so completely turning the market upside down. And so there's a revision. They want to do a cannabis 2.0 where they're trying to fix this seed to sale software tracking that we haven't had since October of 2017. And we need that data. It's by law. They're supposed to be providing that data to us, and we just don't have any of that. So they want to create a social equity program. They want to implement the ability for small businesses and medical access. But they want to create, that new seed to sale software tracking component, as well as following Oregon's lead with interstate commerce. So I wanted to ask you to kind of unpack the unconstitutionality behind what Oregon did in the state as well as in the House in DC, which was to implement a bill to allow for the interstate travel of what is a Schedule 1. And so if Washington also does that, and we have an I-5 corridor up the West Coast, you mentioned it's unconstitutional.
Well, that has to do with the States Act being unconstitutional, because then it's going to respect every law of the state. So that if the state that is in Indiana, for example, it's right Idaho would be adjacent to you. It's draconian relative to the state of Washington, the state of Oregon. Indiana's draconian relative to the state of Illinois. So if every state's marijuana laws are then the law of the land, at the federal level, you have a hodgepodge of laws federally, which means that you're treating under federal law somebody in Indiana differently than you're treating somebody in Illinois. So that I think violates the 14th Amendment. Whereas if you do the Robacher-McClintock Amendment now, which is the Robacher-Blumenauer Amendment, where they just defund the Department of Justice enforceability through their appropriations actions. So you say, look, we don't want to create this constitutional conundrum, but we also don't want the DOJ and the DEA kicking down people's doors, so that we just defund all state law compliant medical or adult use cannabis. So if you're in California and you're following the state's cannabis laws, sorry, there's no money to enforce the federal cannabis laws in your jurisdiction. That, I don't think you draw the constitutional challenge, but also, it still doesn't get at the access to the banking. So the Safe Banking Act being passed it's as important. It's at least, because then you're going to have, it's all about developing that infrastructure where you have this very young black market underground industry that needs to have the same type of supply chain management that any other complex agricultural commodity business would, Add him back.
But the lowest rate, the separation processors has created this super competitive market, and then now you throw this inability to sell and diversify CBD products has thrown a wrench in a lot of businesses like Nana's Secret, who spent some time trying to transition from medical to the regulated market and then pivoted to CBD. And then timing, this industry is volatile, and you get
very volatile.
Yeah, you get slammed with the inability to sell. How do you pivot? That's a game changer. It's a tough thing to do as a small business.
And this is her site. I remember this tent at Hemp Fest when I met you. I remember that tent being there because it was very colorful. But let's welcome her. Let's welcome her to the show. Hello, Cecilia. How are you?
Happy you stopped at Hemp Fest and check out what we're doing. And like Josh was talking about, it's extremely disturbing that the state has come in at the last minute, actually 2 days before we bottled Nana's Secret CBD soda, with a letter saying that I can't put my medicine in my beverages. This is a product that I developed in medical 2013, so that I would have medicine to control my epilepsy that would not damage my kidneys and liver. And now that's exactly what they're doing. They're saying cannot do this. I agree. This must be unconstitutional. We should be allowed medicine that God has given us to grow from a seed and put in our bodies, whether it be through smoking it, putting it in our food products, our beverages, whatever. We should be legally allowed to do that. This is not a type of drug that causes side effects that shortens our life, like the prescription drugs I've taken for 48 years.
Yeah, and this is Washington State, right? This isn't Idaho. This is Washington State.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
You guys have had legal cannabis for over a decade, and CBD products are being taken down from shelves. Why? Why are they saying they're being taken down?
I would like to speak to that. I believe they're being taken down because currently the Washington State Liquor Control Board, Liquor and Cannabis Board, currently charge excessive amounts of taxes on the THC products. And as soon as Big Pharma started developing CBD products, and Washington State saw how much money they could make in taxes by doing the same thing to CBD market, they put a hold on any kind of products that we could make in the industry because they see what we're doing. They're not stupid people. They understand that the products that we're making is going to keep people alive much longer than the pharmaceutical drugs that we are currently being prescribed.
So you think that the Washington State would have a profit motive incentive to collect additional taxes because hemp and its derivative of CBD is not being taxed in the same method as cannabis and its derivative Delta-9 THC?
I do believe that. They are already charging excessive amounts of taxes for the THC, which is coming from the same plant. And they're stepping back going, oh, well, the people who are manufacturing CBD from this plant have a much better product. It's not just for people to use occasionally like a glass of wine. This is a product that I need twice a day, every day, just to stay alive. So the profit margin is much larger.
The taxes are 37% in Washington, and it doesn't include hemp or CBD. So the I-502 bill that passed regulating adult use cannabis did not include CBD, and it doesn't even allow the Liquor and Cannabis Board, the state's regulatory authority, to even regulate CBD. So there was a state bill, I believe, that banned it. And I'm with Cecilia. I totally agree that it's about finance. This is about money. It's not about saving the children from CBD or the snake oil CBDs. This is about money.
Yeah, that's something else. But like, I thought maybe what they were doing was simply because the FDA has not yet spoken or addressed regarding the regulations, because those are forthcoming this fall. And like we did, the USDA had the press release about crop insurance being available next year. And Mitch McConnell and the Congress was very direct in the sense that they want CBD products available for the people. So it's going to be interesting to see how the FDA decides to treat this product. And that is one of those things where it gets into DSHEA. Have you ever heard of the DSHEA law from 1994 about how, it has to do with like herbal supplements, and like if something existed in the food supply prior to 1994, you didn't need to have what they call a new dietary ingredient label for this ingredient. However, they are making the assertion that CBD extract didn't exist in the food supply prior to 1994, which is absurd. And it's so absurd because tincture of cannabis indica has been in the pharmacopoeia until they took it out in 1937. And it wasn't like, and cannabidiol was isolated in 1940. So they were finding out in real time after they had prohibited marijuana in 1937. The chemists found out about cannabidiol in 1940, and it was finally taken out of the pharmacopoeia in 1942. And now they're making the assertion. We have to see how the FDA comes down on their rules and their regs. But if they're making the assertion that this is a new dietary ingredient, which we've known for thousands of years, and we've been consuming as tinctures and as hashish, and then we eventually bred the plant so that it would have a lot more of the THC, simply because that was the psychoactive form. It's not like it didn't exist in the food supply before 1994. That's just preposterous.
Right. My CBD correspondent went out immediately to Walgreens and Rite Aid and the local Bartels and Fred Meyer or Kroger. and looked at what was happening, and some of the products were being taken off the shelf until those packaging were being replaced by Curaleaf's claims and the FDA showing their cards. However, they didn't have their banks shut down. They didn't have to pull the products off the shelf. They didn't have to ban CBD. They just had to stop making claims. But Washington went above and beyond, following California, and just banning it outright. So you have to kind of wonder who's in charge to make that financial decision, who benefits from that. You don't see, out in the malls where cinnamon buns with, twice the caloric intake and twice the daily fat intake. You don't see them going in there and stopping that, for the kids, obesity's sake. So really, I mean, this is about money. This is a pause or a halt until they can figure it out. I don't know who's behind it, but it's unfortunate because, I mean, when you launch your brand at HempFest and then one business day later, they say you can't have the CBD beverage, that is unfortunate. That's a huge impact to a small business.
Yeah. That is something along the lines of, there's political risk in business, but that was just, you don't even see it coming. You invest all this time, you invest all this money. Let's ask Cecilia how long had you been working on Nana's Secret to make your product?
I started making Nana's Secret sodas in April 2013. I came out with 10 different flavors soda. I have one of the largest soda manufacturers here in Washington that's working with me. And when they told me I could not produce my sodas with my medicine, I had to stop and think about that really quick if I was going to move forward and how I was going to do so. I have already made plans to put the CBD into a packet similar to a sugar packet and shrink wrap that to the outside of the bottles. Therefore, I would not be breaking any Washington state rules.
Wait, you're telling me that if you put the CBD in the soda, no. But if you put the CBD in like a sugar packet and tape it to the soda and sell it to them that way, that's okay?
We're not going to be taping it. We're going to be shrink wrapping. So it's actually one product. It's just not inside the food beverage. And I'm working with Uncle Ike's to get these on the shelf this week. And he didn't seem to have a problem with that whatsoever. So I guess we're going to find out.
That's something else. I just can't believe that that's how you get around the law. Like, all you have to do is not mix the two together and just say, like, no, this is I'm not sure if it's CBD isolate or a whole, whatever they call it, it's not the whole leaf extract, but it's like, the broad spectrum extract of the cannabis plant itself. However, that's just bazonkers, I believe, is the appropriate word for that. I mean, there's so many instances in the hemp and also the cannabis, it's all cannabis laws of these types of perplexing things. And it's not this is the most egregious example of the rug being pulled out unfairly out of any hemp business. But some of the hemp businesses in Illinois, they have a hard time finding banks. And then they bought all this seed, they farmed, and now to have the state saying, like, we're going to be testing for total THC as opposed to testing for Delta 9 THC, that could just eviscerate the crop. That could make these are people losing their life savings then, because they've plowed hundreds of thousands of dollars into starting this new agricultural industry in the state of Illinois called hemp, CBD being its largest component. Probably 75% of those 18,000 acres were planted for CBD hemp flower. And the CBD hemp flower, when grown correctly, will come in exceedingly light at Delta 9 tetrahydrocannabidiol. I'm sorry, cannabinol. Cannabidiol is different. Cannabinol, because of its genetics, but it may still contain 0.3 to 0.6, maybe even 0.7% THCA, which they said that they're not supposed to test for. You're supposed to use a high pressure liquid chromatography. So, I mean, that could be just cataclysmic. We'll have to wait and see what happens to the price of hemp and the spot price of biomass on this. But Cecilia, do you have any friends in government that you can lobby to?
It appears that's what I'm going to have to do. I would like to speak to your issue with how much CBD and THC is in these plants, because I don't think people understand from a medical patient's perspective, We don't get high on the THC, and it doesn't really matter to me how much percentage of THC, as long as I get the CBD amount that I need to control my seizures. The THC that's combined with the CBD, all it does is basically activate the CBD to control the electrical currents that are not working correctly in our brain. I cannot for the life of me understand why anybody, whether it's in government or in the business, can't understand we need this medicine. And instead of putting up obstacles in front of us about laws that people don't really understand how the medicine works, they're just shooting themselves in the foot, because every one of them at some point in their life, they're going to get old and they're going to be sick, and they're going to need this medicine, or they're going to have side effects and shorter lifetime because they don't have it.
Yeah, but again, I say this all the time when I'm talking to people, and a lot of people do not understand the plant. And so I'll explain it well, why did they make this Delta 9 level? And well, why did they call it marijuana? Well, why do they do all these things? Because they're regulating something that they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. And the amount of regulations that we have, and the amount of conflicting regulations and confusion, and the growing pains that we have in this new industry, which for the past 80 years has just been silenced for no real good reason, except for racism, which is, again, no real good reason. It just boggles the mind. And I always kind of equate it to these guys that are legislating this have the same amount of personal experience and knowledge as that entire tribunal called Congress that's legislating a women's right to choose. And they don't have uteruses. They don't know what they're talking about, but yet they're the ones making the rules. It makes no sense.
We'll be going down to Olympia for lobby days again, late January for the first session. So I have no doubt that Cecilia will be down there with us to try and prevent some of the crazy stuff that's been happening. October last year, for example, it's not the first time we've been blindsided when the Liquor and Cannabis Board tried to implement a rule that would have affected 70% of the edibles market by changing the color of the edible and packaging. They literally wanted to change the color because they thought it would be attractive to children, as well as the shapes. The shapes of the edibles were specific because apparently that's going to be attractive to children. And this comes from the same regulator that has pink bubblegum vodka.
Yeah,
so there's
pink bubblegum vodka, but yet when you're dealing with something safer than that vodka and not directed to children with the pink bubblegum, then they don't mention it whatsoever.
You can't even get into the store unless you're 21, but you can go to the grocery store and take a look at that vodka all day long on the end shelf, literally at Fred Meyer, right next to the children's stuff.
Yeah, the whipped cream flavored vodka.
It's crazy.
No marketing to children. But
article yesterday, this is extremely important. There are small children who don't want to take their medicine. They don't like the way their food tastes, whatever. I don't like taking pills because I've been forced to take them my whole life. So this is really just a simple marketing strategy. Those children should be taught that there are gummies of any shape, whether they be an animal shape or a square, whatever. But it's an alternative for these children who need this medicine to stay alive, not just to make $1.
That's right. Yeah, but it isn't just to make $1, but then it seems like the more you dig into the whole thing, it's really about just making $1, which is terrible. But there's no social equity component to the Washington state law, right? Am I wrong on that?
You're not, but they just put in that same press release that they want a social equity program built into what they're calling Cannabis 2.0.
Oh, Cannabis 2.0. It's just like the internet in 2004.
Great. Can't wait for that slow speed dial up. This Petri dish experiment in Washington state, unfortunately, is being copied out in Massachusetts, where they're going to have limited capital investment, which is going to stunt small business growth, which is going to hinder capital and scaling and just product availability. And so the relevancy, I think, to Illinois is look at what we're doing and just take a look at what worst case scenario is. You think $1 million is going to be enough for you to open your business? It's not. I've seen people that can't even produce a single gram. So look at this as an example of the volatility and worst case scenario and try not to implement it. I'm talking to you, Massachusetts.
Well, we'll have to get somebody from Massachusetts on, but I was reviewing for a global thing that I'll be doing for the ABA in October, a review of the laws in particular states. And like Massachusetts is a lot more relaxed than the state of Illinois. And so if I was putting together applications and my consultants that I was using was from out in Massachusetts, I'd be like, I'm going to talk to somebody in Colorado.
Yeah, they stole our limited capital, so they're really going to constrict the amount of investment that can go in there, which was supposed to stop black market and illegal funds, but really is just restricting the amount of flexibility that companies can have. They can't have financing or banking, and now you can't have investment. I mean, really, it's trying to operate with two hands tied behind your back.
Yep, and that's before we count into 200 IRC 280E. Cecilia, what did you say?
I think the black market is a big part of the problem. They came into Washington State and tried to buy our 502 license. And it is my opinion that those same people are connected with some dirty attorneys and the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board, because my 502 license was shut down and I was actually locked out of my processing space, and that license is still being used.
Is that how they do it in Washington State? There's a finite number of licenses and they can kind of kick out who has it and bring in who they want?
Only if you violate a law.
Yes.
Okay. So they were claiming that you were violating the law. What law were they claiming you were violating?
No. What happened was there were some groups of men, 3 different groups, try to purchase my 502 recreational license. And at the entire process, I've been represented by legal counsel, and today I have no 502 grow license because they shut it down, but they kept the processing license open and locked me out of my physical facility that was licensed in Anna's Secret. And they're still doing whatever they're doing. I don't even know what they're doing. I just know that I have walked into stores since they were shut down in February, and I have bought product that has my UBI number on it with their name. So there's some dirty stuff going on. I just don't know how to stop it, and I'm not going to stop until I find out.
Yep. That's one of the things that in the Illinois law that they really do in the first opening tenets, the purpose of the law, they really talk about this whole fairness and social equity and how it's supposed to all be administered above board and by the rules and by the book. And we're all going to be good people. And hopefully that's how it's actually orchestrated and people get their licenses that way and it all works. But it sounds like the stuff that you guys are talking about and experiencing in Washington State erodes that confidence that I kind of have on it,
I'm not optimistic. I was a banker for a long time. The SBA does not give out minority loans very well. It's incredibly difficult. And then you look at the fine print and you have to be there 5 years. And half a decade in this industry is a lifetime. There's no way that someone's going to stick around 5 years and when businesses are flipping every 18 months. And
they're talking about that's 20% of your application score. 20% of your application score. So like if you have a decent application and then you get that 20%, boom. I mean, who's going to compete with you? And so it's going to be very, very interesting to see who wins the first round of Illinois licenses. And I'll go through them. Hopefully they'll publish them, at least like they do. They publish a lot of the applications with all the standard operating procedures, all that secret sauce of, oh, here's how we do our stuff. Well, don't tell anybody that. Yes. Nobody will figure out how we keep track of all these accounting ledgers. Whatever, man. You have to make sure that the consultants are paid for their work too, and they help with the operations, and there's good operators out there. But it just, how are they scored, and what do these companies really stand for? And with Illinois' reputation of being less than not corrupt, I'm kind of wondering what is going to happen with the awards of the licenses. So when I'm like pouring through the people who win next spring, and gosh, I hope that some of my clients get through, and I tell them it looks like it's going to be 9 to 10 spots. So like you got like a 90% failure rate, bud, but you still want to get in the industry. All right, cool. Let's make the best application for you. We have to address social equity, and if we don't, it's going to be bad.
Yeah, you need every advantage you can, right? So whether you can get that social equity applicant or whether you're looking for the best place to do business, you could be headquartered in Illinois and have an IPO in Canada and operate out of Puerto Rico to take advantage of the tax benefits down there with Act 20. I think that if you're going to stay in this business, learn to be flexible and learn to be blindsided. When people are paying $40,000 for packaging and then the laws change the next day, you can either throw that away or slap a sticker on it.
Yeah, and that's the weirdest thing in the sense that they're giving out these social equity points, and the people that are going to be getting those points aren't going to be well capitalized. And so are they just going to get totally railroaded and taken out that fast? So I don't know. It's an exceedingly dynamic industry, though. That much I am aware of.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's happening here. People in the 502 business are being pushed out. I watched and watched and watched. But the key, I think, for me especially, is just to continue white labeling my products, continue bottling my sodas, and in states where I have to attach the medicine in a different package to that bottle, that's what I'm going to do. And if somebody comes along and tells me I can't do it that way, I will find another way.
Are you able
pivot to stay relevant?
Yeah. Are you able to, is this hemp-derived CBD, legal in all 50 states pursuant to the Farm Bill?
The hemp CBD that I'm using is coming from a Kentucky farm that is involved in a pilot program with the Kentucky Department of Agriculture.
Right. So it's totally legal. And so there's nothing to prevent you from selling these sodas online and shipping them out of Washington State. You just can't put them on the shelves in Washington State.
I'm putting them on the shelf in Washington State in Uncle Ike's glass store with the CBD attached separately for his customers to mix at home or once they leave his store.
Interesting, because I go to the grocery store in Chicago and they got CBD water. I go to the gas station, CBD water. So you could be selling these in Illinois. Yes. No, I have no doubt in my mind about that. I can't believe that this law is so new and strange and complicated, and it makes no sense that what's totally legal in Kentucky, Illinois, for just CBD water. I mean, granted, it's a soda, but still, just hemp-derived CBD infused liquid, you can't do in Washington State. And it's only been that because I was just in HempFest 2 weeks ago. I remember seeing your booth. It was pink. It was right next to the symposium tent. Very eye-catching, which is what you want in a booth. You want somebody look and be like, oh, let's go talk to them. And people were excited about the soda as well. I just can't believe that the next day, shut it down. That's crazy.
It is.
Man. Well, what other types of developments have you been seeing in the general industry, Josh, besides Washington State and the crazy, messed up world that is CBD hemp?
Consolidation. There's companies that are merging. So we saw Forefront Venture merge with CanaX Capital. That went from a $50 million to a $500 million market cap based on that merger.
How are they setting that market cap, by the way? Are they setting that market cap by traditional, here's our sales numbers, here's where these things are going. Let's look at our statement of cash flows and then see how we're canceling debt and we're increasing revenues, or how are they getting that $500 million number?
That market cap is just based on the amount of investment from shareholders. So people seeing the development and the merger and liking that synergy and then just buying that stock. And so the revenues, of 50 million have generated a value of 500 million.
That makes no sense.
Based on future expectations.
Right. Magic. Yeah, it's the
and the other thing too is with the Ghost OG family here locally, they're getting farms for $1. Literally, they're not paying anything for tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. It's totally legal, and they're getting these farms with an expectation of a 5 or 6% royalty. They know what they're doing. They're able to produce a phenomenal product. And these 1,400 farms, there's licenses, about 800 of them are active, but they're willing to just walk away, because they can't do anything with it. And so this Ghost OG family is able to actually take this crop and make something that's worthy of ingesting, smoking, whatever. And that's what I'm seeing, is giving licenses away for an expectation of maybe 5 or 6%.
So let's go over that transaction again. You give the license away, but then you hold on to the cash flow of 5 to 6%.
Yeah, so they'll just take a royalty, whatever they make. That license holder will get 5 or 6% non-voting rights, so they retain
it's
some
like a
ownership.
Preferred shareholder.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a lot less of a headache. And then the thing about cannabis is it sells itself. It's cannabis.
Well, 7 to 8 cents a gram. We're going to see in November as more farms get out the game. That's what I'm seeing. Fourth quarter every year is people selling out, maybe 1 million grams at about 7.5 cents to get out.
7.5 cents a gram of cannabis. I thought a gram of cannabis, like if you're making it if you're making that gram of cannabis in Canada, it's like $4 a gram. If you're making that gram of cannabis down in Colombia, you can get it for like 50 cents. How are you getting 7 cents a gram of cannabis out on the West Coast?
Liquidation. They're not looking for a profit, but it is the highest, profit. If you look at the arbitrage aspect, the Seattle to New York is your best arbitrage, and it's people getting out the game. We've been here
there is no arbitrage between Seattle and New York, simply because hype. Oh, I see. We're talking about the black market, which doesn't exist. Yeah. Yeah. There are no shipments from Seattle to New York. Clearly.
No divergence.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the problem. And then you have that culture from British Columbia, the BC bud, and the culture from the Mendocino County and the Emerald Triangle in California, where those people have been growing on high quality cannabis outdoor. Where they can outdoor, further south. I'm not sure if you can do it in BC. Maybe, you tell me, man. You're from the Pacific Northwest, and because of that high quality and then the low price point, why am I going to try to get this regulated when I just sell it out the back? And so it's been harder for them to. We do a lot more tracking of seed to sale here. We don't want our supply being diverted and our proceeds of that being untaxed.
So I'll tell you some information on Oregon, which has an excess of 1 billion joints, 6.5 years worth of oversupply. What I've heard, now this is kind of insider information, but still kind of rumor, but credible. All right. What I've heard is that there was divergence in the Oregon market for the colas or the grade A bud, and they took the stems and stalks and the garbage, and that replaced the weight for what was diverted out to the black market. And now they can't sell it. They can't make oil with it. And that's what the oversupply is in Oregon, which isn't really an oversupply. And I've heard this from multiple people who don't talk to one another, give me the same information. So what we're seeing and why, you kind of have to infer on the data. Why isn't it selling? I go down there and they've got some great products. So why do they have the oversupply? And how many licenses are there? Too many? Okay, well, maybe that's the reason.
Yeah, that's going to be the Oklahoma problem. I mean, when you don't control the supply like that, and then you have high quality stuff and everybody can have it, the price goes down substantially. But, that's 20.
Colombia will be that big box. Like you mentioned, Colombia will be that big box cannabis extractor with the agricultural facilities they have and the low human labor costs. Mm-hmm. They will be extracting 55 gallons of oil at a price you cannot compete with. And if you aren't doing business in Puerto Rico as a CBD company, you will not be in business in a couple of years because you don't have the margins to lose. And that's up at 20% swing.
But that basically means that the farmers are all going to go under. So I don't know about that. We'll see.
I think 98% will go under.
That's ominous. Hey, Illinois farmers sitting on 18,000 acres that might be worthless. The news gets worse.
You have to look for higher margin products, CBG, CBN, THCV, whatever those rare cannabinoids are. Look for a higher margin.
Yeah, you can look for those, but those get very, very difficult to make. And then you have the genetics, and it's all really about selling the sizzle. Oh, hang on. I think Cecilia wants to chime in. Cecilia, what are you saying?
You have avenues of income coming in from these products. It's going to be products across the country because we're going to have to become large enough that we can with the people who's coming in trying to push us out. Fortunately, I had family and friends I could go back to on watching my soda business. And now I have people who have access to funds, so I don't have to worry about if I can do my business or not. But I do have to worry about the rules and regulations getting in front of us and how we're going to deal with those.
Yeah. I mean, by making this prohibition as to having food and drink with CBD, hemp derived, illegal in the state of Washington, they've done no favors to the small business owner that's trying to make it.
For patients who just want to stay alive.
Right.
Yeah, they put roadblocks and barriers and every kind of blockade they can in the way, whether it's labeling or restrictions, product limitations, or just CBD banned outright. Washington State is probably one of the most difficult places to do business. And I know CPAs and attorneys and professionals that just recommend do not get involved in Washington State. It's just too difficult. When you don't have the option of being vertically integrated, that is from seed to sale, you lose control. You know, as a business owner, you have a fiduciary duty to give your shareholders and yourself the most return you can on your investment. And being separated creates too many problems. And so when you have those unfortunate regulatory events, not having full control is just proven to be a business nightmare.
So you support the complete vertical integration of the industry, because in Florida, people were very upset that they couldn't get into the industry, and the barriers to entry for the industry were obscene because you had to be fully vertically integrated. So if you weren't sitting on $20 million, which who's sitting on $20 million, you know, the super rich, and that's it. Okay, well, if you're super rich, you can now get into the cannabis industry. So how do you create a legislative rubric, and that's what they're really trying to do in Illinois, where you can make it dispersed and have a lot of people have high quality jobs and decent incomes. And that's trying to thread the needle of controlling the supply, and I don't know if it can be done.
Follow Colorado, give people the option. If you want to be a producer, great, or a processor, great, or a retail shop, great. Most of them will fail if they don't have all three. I think that you should just have that option.
Yeah, they do allow that in Illinois, where you're allowed to own a dispensary, you're allowed to own a craft grow, you're allowed to own an infuser, which, you know, so you could make all the products. But it's just very, very small relative to the large producers. So, like, you know, the difference between 5,000 square feet flowering space and 210,000 square feet flowering space is substantial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if Cecilia had a little boutique, you know, in West Seattle, a trendy little neighborhood she lives in, and she were able to sell her apothecary products when CBD was banned, and she just pivoted to CBG or CBN and just kept selling, that would give her the opportunity to do that. But in Washington State, she can't sell anything with THC and now CBD. So again, I think just restricting small business growth is kind of this repetitive thing we've been seeing in Washington State, where the regulators just keep smashing us down like that whack-a-mole.
It's unconstitutional for them to prevent us from creating businesses to support ourselves, to feed ourselves, and to medicate ourselves. That is unconstitutional.
It's one heck of an overreach of regulation, to be sure, especially once the federal government said explicitly industrial hemp is no longer in the Controlled Substances Act and is legal. And I'm assuming that industrial hemp is also legal in the state of Washington. And then suddenly, it's not like CBD, which we've known of for 80 years, became unsafe in the interim. There's just no evidence of that. I would like to know their thesis behind the legislative change that they made not even 2 weeks ago after Hemp Fest. You know, what law, how did it become effective, and why?
So would we.
Oh, really? That's ridiculous. I figured somebody
actually sent a letter to my bottler. I will forward to you when I'm off the phone.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, it came as a surprise. I don't think anybody really understands, the validity or, the reasoning behind it. Even that press release that came out was days later. So we're all kind of left in the dark wondering. And so there's a Cannabis Alliance, a lobbying group in Washington that I'm a member of. And so I get those emails every day, and it's urgent. All these urgent subject matters trying to get. They only gave us 8 days to respond to one initiative, and so and it was on a holiday weekend.
How does that satisfy due process? You were given notice, but there's no opportunity to be heard. Hey, we're giving you notice that we're shutting down your entire business model. Have a good day.
Yeah, it's like a Friday news dump, and I just kind of hope it goes away over the weekend. I mean, those are potential lawsuits. All of it. It's just one nightmare after another.
Yeah, but it's not like the small business owner has the financial wherewithal to be able to stomach a lawsuit while they're having an injunction against their cash flows. And the more ridiculous thing is, it's like, wait, I can't sell it in my own state. All right, I can literally sell it in every other state.
Yeah, we just had somebody go to Texas. One of our friends that me and Cecilia know, have a shampoo line, and she just went to Texas. And that's a very conservative state. To say you're going from Seattle to Dallas, really, because you can't sell it here? That's crazy.
I have a question, a legal question, because I don't really know the answer, and I try to stay on this. But if my bottler here in Seattle bottled beverages with CBD in it, with an agreement that those products were not to be sold in Washington State, but are allowed in other states, can we do that?
You see, the thing about contracts, and I want to preface this by saying that not only is this not legal advice, I'm just mentioning this as news. Okay, you can do anything. That's the cool thing about America. You may not be allowed to do it legally. You can still do it. Then they have to catch you. And then they have to stop you, unless it's the state of Washington. Then they just give you 8 days and they shut your business down. But the thing about why a lot of people they just go to the gold rush. They just planted those 18,000 acres of hemp in Illinois is because they can do it, and they have these dreams, and they don't care. And so the thing about it is most contracts are performed. 98% of them are performed. The ones that don't get performed, they go to litigation. And out of all that stuff that goes to litigation and you sue over, 99% of it gets settled. So the next time you're in a business and it's less than above board, and you're like, well, what's the ramifications? Here's the long and short of it. The ramifications is you can do it. You might get caught. If you get caught, you might get sued. If you get sued, you'll probably settle. Do you want to risk it? That's your business judgment. As your counsel, I would say that. But again, this is just behind the curtain kind of information. That's not advice to eschew your contractual duties. You have a good faith basis and duty to perform under your obligations of a lawful contract, which, of course, this entire episode has been us discussing completely unlawful contracts, which are enforceable because it's crazy and it's cannabis.
Preach.
Yep.
Correct. That's totally correct.
Yeah.
So do it, Cecilia.
Yeah.
I will continue to make Nana Secret sodas until the day I die.
There you go. Now remember, that was educational purposes. I am not giving legal advice. I'm just saying that's what happens in contracts.
I also took one of Cecilia's transdermal patches last year when I climbed the Space Needle. It's 55 stories. I'm an old guy, right? I smoke blunts. It's my guilty pleasure. But her transdermal patch allowed me to climb that beast in 10 minutes. And there's no way I could have done it without it, because I had some intermittent pain as I'm running up, and it would shoot up my spine. I'm like, whoa, that hurts. And then it would go away. Just reminding me of how good the patch was working. I was very grateful to have that. So
tell us about those transdermal patches, Cecilia. What do you put in those?
Mm-hmm.
The transdermal patch is made on the East Coast for Nana's Secret. It has 25 milligrams of CBD, and I wear these every day. They're 12-hour time release, so I wear one in the morning, I wear one at night. They help not only control my seizures, but they are absolutely wonderful for anxiety. I had a really bad anxiety attack yesterday, and I put one on, and I don't believe anything works instantly, but it worked really fast. So I was I was happy about that. And they're a really good option for small children who can't swallow pills or don't like to taste. Put it on like a Band-Aid.
Just don't wear one at a movie theater. They have an aroma that can be smelled from a ways away.
Oh, really?
That's what I thought.
We have a new formulation. Then since you tried that for your run,
Yeah, that was last September.
To get you the new ones, yes, they're much better.
Oh, good. I mean, it wasn't bad. It's just
aroma. Like, what does it smell like? Does it smell like weed?
No, it would be good. No, it just was more like a very strong not aloe, but like a Bengay. Yeah, menthol.
Yeah. Menthol.
Yep.
Yeah. The new formula doesn't have that smell at all.
It was worth it. I'm telling you, it was good.
Yeah. I've had bodybuilders tell me that they put the patch on and they go to the gym and work out, and they'll be doing their entire workout, and it makes them feel like they have more strength. They don't want to stop. They just want to keep working out because it makes them feel so good.
And really, that's going to be kind of the workaround is those non-ingestibles, right? So the topicals and tinctures and things that you're not allowed to sell because you're consuming them, there are the other options that you can have, like a transdermal patch. Got to pivot to stay relevant.
I don't think the tinctures are considered an edible, are they? They're an oil extract.
Yeah, but you take them orally. That's the thing.
I believe it is an edible, whereas a topical, people are selling topicals, but really they're an edible. And so you can sell more than 100 milligrams as a topical, and so people are eating this butter or whatever it is as an edible to. And so there's a workaround. You know, if you have a 500 milligram topical and you can still eat it, but you're not selling it as an edible. Well, what is it?
That just calls into question more and makes the regulation that happened in the past 2 weeks all the more suspicious. Oh, you can put the CBD in a packet outside the bottle. Oh, you can call this butter that's infused with CBD a topical ointment. It's clearly made out of butter and CBD. It's a topical ointment. You know, it's just strange.
Right.
It is very strange, and it's just wrong.
You need to have nerves of steel in order to get through all of the various laws and the changes. You would think after 5 years we would have this figured out, and it's not even close. They just keep on changing it. Got to stay flexible.
Hopefully we'll see a change real soon.
I never know when to, interrupt these amazing conversations we're having, but it's getting to be that time. Josh and Cecilia, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can we follow you guys and find you on the internet?
nanasecret.com. Thank you so much for inviting me today.
And then you can reach me at josh@thetalkinghedge.com or check out the talkinghedgepodcast.com.
Awesome. Great. Well, we're going to have a follow-up on Nana's Secret within a few hours on cannabisindustrylawyer.com. Once again,
that's where you can find me. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next Wednesday. Make sure you like and subscribe.
Yeah, we have some great guests coming up, so you're going to want to tune into those.
Truly.
We will.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.